The dust cloud behind the departing wagon had barely settled when Hannah Kelley realized her stepbrother was not coming back. She stood alone on the empty prairie road, her traveling bag at her feet, watching the last visible speck of Daniel's wagon disappear into the shimmering horizon as the Colorado sun beat down mercilessly overhead. He had told her to wait right there, that he needed to check something just ahead, but 20 minutes had stretched into an hour, and the truth settled over her like the oppressive July heat of 1882. He had abandoned her, miles from Pueblo, miles from anywhere, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the few possessions in her worn leather bag. Hannah's throat tightened as she fought back tears. She was 19 years old, orphaned when her mother died 6 months ago, and now the stepbrother who had reluctantly agreed to take her west had left her stranded in the middle of nowhere. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, nothing but prairie grass bending in the hot wind, distant mountains purple against the bright sky, and the rutted dirt road cutting through it all like a scar. She had no water, no food, no idea which direction would lead to safety. She sank down onto her bag, trying to think clearly through her rising panic. Daniel had never wanted her around. That much had been obvious from the moment their parents married 5 years ago. He had tolerated her when their mother was alive, but after the funeral, his resentment had turned cold and calculating. He had promised to take her to Pueblo, where she could find work as a seamstress, but now she understood his plan had always been to rid himself of the burden she represented. The sun climbed higher, and Hannah knew she could not simply sit here waiting for rescue that might never come. The road ran roughly east to west, and she tried to remember which direction they had been traveling. West toward Pueblo, she thought, but how far had they come from the last town? 20 miles? 30? She stood up, brushing the dust from her dark blue traveling dress, and picked up her bag. She would walk west. It was her only choice. She had been walking for perhaps 2 hours when she heard the sound. At first she thought it was thunder, but the sky remained cloudless and brilliant. Then she realized it was hoofbeats, growing louder behind her. Hannah turned, hope and fear warring in her chest. A single rider approached at a steady gallop, leading a pack horse behind him. As he drew closer, she could make out details. A tall man on a buckskin horse wearing a wide-brimmed hat, dark vest over a dusty white shirt, and a red bandana around his neck. The rider slowed as he approached, his eyes taking in the sight of her standing alone on the empty road. He was perhaps 24 or 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of aged whiskey that studied her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. He had a strong jaw shadowed with a few days' growth of beard, and there was something solid and capable about the way he sat his horse. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat as he brought his mount to a halt, a respectful distance away. His voice was deep and steady. "You all right out here?" Hannah's pride warred with her desperation. She wanted to lie, to say everything was fine, but her cracked lips and the obvious isolation of her situation made deception pointless. "My stepbrother left me here," she said, her voice hoarse from thirst and emotion. "I have been walking toward Pueblo, but I am not certain how far it might be." The cowboy's expression darkened. "He left you? Just abandoned you out here?" "Yes." The single word carried all her hurt and anger. He swung down from his saddle in one fluid motion, pulling a canteen from his saddle horn. "Here," he said, holding it out to her. "Drink slow or you will make yourself sick." Hannah took the canteen with trembling hands, and the first sip of cool water was the most wonderful thing she had ever tasted. She forced herself to drink slowly, as he had instructed, though she wanted to gulp it down. When she finally lowered the canteen, she found him watching her with those steady amber eyes. "I am Frank Kendrick," he said. "I have a ranch about 8 miles north of Pueblo. You are about 15 miles out still. Too far to walk in this heat without water." "Hannah Kelley," she managed. "I am grateful for the water, Mr. Kendrick." "Frank," he corrected gently. "And I cannot leave you out here. I will take you into Pueblo. You have family there? No family anywhere, not anymore. I was hoping to find work as a seamstress. Something shifted in his expression, a softness around his eyes that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Well, Miss Kelley, let us get you to town first. You can ride my horse. I will lead her. I cannot take your horse, Hannah protested, though her feet already ached terribly in her buttoned boots. You can and you will, Frank said firmly. A gentleman does not let a lady walk when he has a perfectly good horse available. He held out his hand to help her mount, and after a moment's hesitation, Hannah placed her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip strong and steady. He helped her into the saddle with surprising gentleness, then handed up her bag, which he secured behind the cantle. Just hold on to the horn if you need to, Frank said, taking the reins to lead the horse. Daisy here is gentle as they come. She will not give you any trouble. They began walking, and Hannah found herself studying the man leading her horse. Frank Kendrick moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in this harsh landscape. His shoulders were broad beneath his vest, and she could see the play of muscles in his back and arms as he walked. There was a gun belt slung low on his hips, the holster tied down in the manner of someone who knew how to use the weapon, but something about him suggested he was not a violent man by nature. How long were you walking? Frank asked after a while, glancing back at her. 2 hours, perhaps 3. I am not entirely certain. His jaw tightened. What kind of man abandons a woman out here? Your stepbrother must be a special kind of low. Daniel never wanted me around, Hannah said quietly. I was an obligation he inherited when his father married my mother. When she died, I suppose he saw his opportunity to be rid of me. Frank was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough with controlled anger. No matter the circumstances, you do not abandon family in the middle of nowhere. You do not abandon anyone like that. Something about his vehemence warmed Hannah from the inside. Are you from Colorado originally? She asked, wanting to change the subject. Texas originally, Frank said. Came up here about 5 years ago looking for better grazing land. Found a valley north of Pueblo with good water and grass. Built up the ranch from nothing, just me and my foreman, and a few hired hands. We run cattle mostly, some horses. It must be difficult work. It is, but it is honest, and it is mine. That counts for something. He glanced back at her again, and she saw approval in his eyes. You are holding up well, Miss Kelley, considering what you have been through today. I do not see that I have much choice, Hannah said, but she felt absurdly pleased by his words. They walked in companionable silence for a while, and Hannah found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. There was something inherently trustworthy about Frank Kendrick. Perhaps it was the way he had immediately offered help without expecting anything in return, or the genuine anger he had shown at Daniel's actions. Whatever it was, Hannah felt safer than she had since her mother's death. Do you know Pueblo well? Hannah asked eventually. Well enough. It has grown considerably in the last few years. The railroad came through, and that brought more people, more businesses. You should be able to find work there, though I will warn you it can be a rough town. Mining camps nearby bring in all types. I appreciate the warning, but I can take care of myself. Frank glanced back at her, one eyebrow raised. I do not doubt that, Miss Kelley. You have got steel in you, I can see that. But having steel and having protection are two different things. Pueblo is not always kind to women on their own. Hannah did not reply, mostly because she knew he was right. She had no illusions about the challenges facing her. Without family, without connections, she would be vulnerable in ways she had never experienced before. The thought frightened her, but she pushed the fear down. She had survived her mother's death, survived Daniel's cruelty, and she would survive whatever came next. The sun was lowering toward the western horizon when buildings finally appeared in the distance. Pueblo spread across the landscape where the Arkansas River wound through the valley, the setting sun painting the adobe and wooden structures in shades of gold and amber. Hannah felt relief wash through her, but also a strange reluctance. Once they reached town, Frank Kendrick would deliver her safely and ride on with his life, and she would face her uncertain future alone. "There is a respectable boarding house on 3rd Street," Frank said as they entered the outskirts of town. "Mrs. Harriet Donovan runs it. She is fair and honest, and she does not tolerate any foolishness. I will take you there first if you like." "I do not have much money," Hannah admitted, feeling her cheeks heat with embarrassment. "Daniel was supposed to help me get established, but obviously that plan is no longer viable." Frank's jaw tightened again at the mention of her stepbrother, but his voice remained gentle. "We will figure something out. Mrs. Donovan might know of work opportunities." They rode down the main street as the shops were beginning to close for the evening. Men lounged outside the saloons, and Hannah was acutely aware of the attention they drew, a dusty cowboy leading a horse with a young woman riding. Frank seemed oblivious to the stares, or perhaps he was simply accustomed to attention. He navigated the streets with confidence, finally stopping in front of a neat 2-story house with a painted sign that read Donovan Boarding House. Frank helped Hannah down from the saddle, his hands warm on her waist, and for just a moment they stood close together, his eyes searching her face. "You are sure you are all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Hannah said, though she felt anything but certain. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Kendrick. You likely saved my life today." "Frank," he reminded her again, "and I am glad I came along when I did." He hesitated, seeming to wrestle with something internally. "Miss Kelley, I have to finish my business in town tonight, but I will be staying at the hotel on Union Avenue. If you need anything, anything at all, you send word, and I will come. Do you understand?" Hannah nodded, moved by his concern. "I understand. Promise me." "I promise." Frank seemed satisfied with that. He took her bag down from his horse and carried it up the steps to the boarding house porch, knocking firmly on the door. A moment later, a stout woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes, opened the door. "Frank Kendrick," she said, her stern expression softening slightly. "What brings you to my door?" "Evening, Mrs. Donovan. I found this young lady stranded on the Prairie Road, abandoned by her stepbrother. She is looking for a room and possibly information about work." "She is a seamstress." Mrs. Donovan's eyes sharpened as she looked at Hannah, taking in every detail of her dusty dress and exhausted face. "Abandoned, you say? What is your name, girl?" "Hannah Kelley, madam." "Well, Miss Kelley, I have one room available, but I require payment in advance. $2 a week, which includes breakfast and supper." Hannah's heart sank. She had perhaps $5 to her name, enough for barely 2 weeks. "I will need to find work quickly, but I will take the room." "I might know someone looking for a seamstress," Mrs. Donovan said, her expression remaining stern, but something kind flickering in her eyes. "Come inside and we will discuss it. Thank you for bringing her, Frank." "My pleasure, madam." Frank turned to Hannah, touching his hat brim one more time. "Remember what I said, Miss Kelley. You need anything, you send word." "I will. Thank you again." Hannah wanted to say more, to somehow express the depth of her gratitude, but the words stuck in her throat. She watched as Frank mounted his horse in one smooth motion, gave her a final nod, and rode off down the street. She stood there watching until he disappeared around a corner, feeling an unexpected sense of loss. "Well, do not just stand there gawking," Mrs. Donovan said, not unkindly. "Come inside before you catch your death of something. You look half-starved and completely worn out." Hannah followed the older woman inside, grateful for her brusque kindness. The boarding house was clean and simply furnished, with the smell of something savory cooking wafting from the back. Mrs. Donovan led her up a narrow staircase to a small room on the 2nd floor. It contained a single bed, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, a small wardrobe, and a chair by the window. To Hannah, who had been facing the prospect of sleeping on the prairie, it looked like paradise. Supper is in an hour, Mrs. Donovan said. There is water in the pitcher. Clean yourself up and come down when you hear the bell. She paused at the door, her expression softening slightly. You are safe here, girl. Whatever happened to you today, you are safe now. After Mrs. Donovan left, Hannah sank down onto the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. All the fear and exhaustion and hurt of the day poured out of her in great gasping sobs. She cried for her mother, for Daniel's betrayal, for the uncertain future stretching ahead. But she also cried with relief because somehow, impossibly, she had survived. A stranger with kind eyes had appeared when she needed help most, and now she had a roof over her head and a chance to build something new. When the tears finally subsided, Hannah washed her face and hands in the basin, changed into her only other dress, a simple gray cotton one, and tried to make herself presentable. Her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand showed a young woman with auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun, green eyes still red-rimmed from crying, and a face that was perhaps not beautiful, but had a certain delicate strength to it. She looked older than she had this morning, she thought. The day had aged her. The dinner bell rang, and Hannah made her way downstairs to find a small dining room with 3 tables. 2 other women were already seated, both looking to be in their 40s or 50s, probably widows or spinsters making their way in the world. They nodded politely at Hannah, but did not seem inclined toward conversation. Mrs. Donovan brought out plates of beef stew with thick slices of bread, and Hannah ate ravenously, not realizing how hungry she had been until the food was in front of her. After dinner, Mrs. Donovan asked Hannah to stay behind. I spoke to my neighbor, she said without preamble. Alice Merriweather runs a dress shop on Main Street. She is getting older and her eyes are not what they used to be. She has been looking for someone to help with the fine sewing. I told her you would come by tomorrow morning. Thank you, Hannah said, feeling tears threaten again. Thank you so much, Mrs. Donovan. Do not thank me yet. Alice is particular and not always easy to work for. But she is fair and she pays on time. You do good work for her and you will have steady employment. That night, Hannah lay in her narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the town outside her window. Somewhere in the distance, a piano played in a saloon. Voices drifted on the night air, some laughing, some arguing. Despite the strangeness of it all, Hannah felt a fragile sense of hope beginning to take root. She thought of Frank Kendrick, remembering the steadiness in his eyes, the warmth of his hand helping her mount his horse, the concern in his voice. She wondered if she would ever see him again, and was surprised by how much she wanted to. The next morning, Hannah presented herself at Merriweather's dress shop at precisely 9 o'clock. Alice Merriweather was a thin, sharp-featured woman in her 60s with eyes that missed nothing. She examined Hannah's stitching on a sample piece of cloth with a critical eye, then nodded once. You will do, she said. I can pay you $4 a week to start. You will work 6 days, Monday through Saturday, 8 in the morning until 6 at night. Sundays you have free. There is a lot of work right now. I have orders backed up, and my hands cannot manage the fine detail work anymore. You start today. $4 a week was not generous, but it was enough to pay for her room with a little left over. Hannah accepted gratefully and immediately set to work on a wedding dress that needed delicate embroidery on the bodice. She lost herself in the familiar rhythm of the needle and thread, finding comfort in the work. The days fell into a pattern. Hannah rose early, took breakfast at the boarding house, walked to the dress shop, and worked until evening. The work was demanding but satisfying, and Alice, though stern, proved to be a fair employer. Hannah's skills quickly became apparent, and more than once she caught Alice watching her work with what might have been approval. 2 weeks passed, and Hannah began to feel more settled. She made tentative friendships with the other women at the boarding house. She learned the streets of Pueblo, which shops to frequent, which areas to avoid. She carefully saved every penny she could, building up a small reserve against future emergencies. But through it all, she found herself thinking often of Frank Kendrick, wondering where he was and what he was doing. She told herself it was foolish. He had been kind to a stranger in need, nothing more. She should not read anything deeper into it. Then one Saturday evening, as Hannah was walking back to the boarding house after work, she heard her name called. She turned to find Frank riding down the street toward her, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. "Miss Kelley," he said, swinging down from his horse, "I have been hoping I might run into you." Hannah's heart leaped in her chest, and she had to force herself to respond calmly. "Hello, Frank. I mean, Mr. Kendrick." "Frank?" he corrected, just as he had before. His eyes searched her face. "You look well, better than when I last saw you." "I am well," Hannah said, and realized it was true. "I found work at Mrs. Merriweather's dress shop, thanks to Mrs. Donovan's introduction. I have a room and steady employment. You saved my life that day." "I have not forgotten." Frank's expression grew serious. "I have thought about you often, wondering how you were managing. It has been bothering me, thinking of you alone in a strange town with no one to look out for you." Something warm unfurled in Hannah's chest. "You have been thinking about me?" "More than I probably should," Frank admitted, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "Miss Kelley, I wonder if you might allow me to take you to supper. There is a decent restaurant near the hotel. Nothing fancy, but the food is good and it is respectable." Hannah knew she should refuse. She barely knew this man, and accepting his invitation would mean acknowledging the pull she felt toward him, the way her pulse quickened when he was near. But she found herself nodding instead. "I would like that very much." Frank's smile widened, transforming his face. "Excellent. Are you free now, or should I call for you later?" "Now is fine. I just finished work." He offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Hannah took it. They walked together through the busy Saturday evening streets, and Hannah was acutely aware of the solid warmth of his arm beneath her hand, the way he shortened his stride to match hers, the protective way he steered her around the rougher elements on the sidewalks. The restaurant was indeed simple but clean, with checked tablecloths and the smell of roasted meat filling the air. Frank held her chair for her, a gesture that made Hannah's cheeks warm. When they were both seated with plates of roast chicken and vegetables before them, Frank leaned back and studied her with those steady amber eyes. "Tell me about yourself, Hannah Kelley," he said. "Where are you from? What brought you west?" Hannah found herself telling him things she had not spoken of to anyone else. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her father's death when she was 12, about her mother's remarriage to Daniel's father. She spoke of her mother's illness and death, and the cold way Daniel had looked at her afterward, as if calculating how quickly he could be rid of her. "He told me there were opportunities in Colorado," Hannah said quietly. "He said he would help me get established in Pueblo. That family had to look out for each other. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe I was not completely alone in the world." Frank's hand reached across the table to cover hers, and the simple gesture made tears prick at her eyes. "You are not alone," he said firmly. "Not anymore." "We barely know each other," Hannah protested, though she did not pull her hand away. "That is true, but I would like to change that if you are willing." Frank's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "I have not been able to stop thinking about you, Hannah. The way you held yourself together that day on the prairie, the courage it took to keep walking even though you were terrified. The way you looked at me when I offered you water, like you could not quite believe someone would help you without wanting something in return. It has been haunting me." "I have thought of you too," Hannah admitted softly. "More than I should, probably. You are the first person in a very long time who has shown me genuine kindness." "Then let me show you more," Frank said. "Let me court you properly. I will come into town on Sundays when you are free from work. We can spend time together, get to know each other. And if you find you do not care for my company, you can tell me to leave and I will respect that. But give me a chance." "Hannah, give us a chance." Hannah looked into his earnest face and felt something shift in her chest, like a door she had kept locked finally swinging open. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I would like that." The smile Frank gave her was worth every hardship she had endured to reach this moment. True to his word, Frank came into Pueblo every Sunday after that. He would arrive mid-morning and spend the entire day with Hannah. They walked through the town, talking endlessly about everything and nothing. Hannah learned that Frank had come west at 19 after his parents died in a typhoid outbreak, that he had worked as a ranch hand for several years before saving enough to buy his own land. He spoke of his dreams for the ranch, of building it into something substantial that could support a family. He asked Hannah about her dreams too, and she found herself sharing hopes she had buried long ago. She wanted a home, a real home, not just a rented room. She wanted to continue sewing, perhaps eventually open her own shop. She wanted children someday, a family of her own to love and protect. As she spoke, Frank listened with complete attention, never making her feel foolish for wanting simple things. As the weeks passed, Hannah felt herself falling for Frank Kendrick with a swiftness that should have frightened her, but somehow did not. There was something inevitable about it, as if that moment on the prairie when he had appeared through the dust had set them both on a path that could only lead here. He was kind and steady and honest, everything Daniel had never been. When Frank looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. When he laughed at something, she said, warmth spread through her entire body. One Sunday in late September, nearly 3 months after their first meeting, Frank took Hannah on a buggy ride out of town. The cottonwoods along the river were beginning to turn gold, and the air had the crisp edge of approaching autumn. They drove north along a road that climbed gradually into the foothills, and Hannah realized with a start that Frank was taking her to his ranch. "I want you to see it," he said when she questioned him. "I want you to see what I have built, what I am working toward. It is important to me that you understand my life, Hannah. All of it." The ranch appeared as they crested a rise, and Hannah caught her breath. The valley spread before them, lush with grass despite the late season, with a clear stream winding through it. The house was not large, a simple wooden structure with a wide porch, but it was solid and well built. Barns and corrals spread around it, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. Mountains rose behind it all, their peaks already dusted with early snow. "Oh, Frank," Hannah breathed. "It is beautiful." "You think so?" He sounded pleased and a little anxious. "It is not fancy, but the bones are good. The house could be expanded easily. There is plenty of water, good grazing. The herd has grown every year." He drove the buggy down to the house, where two men emerged from one of the barns. Frank introduced them as his foreman, Bill, and one of his ranch hands, Tommy. They both tipped their hats respectfully to Hannah, though she caught them exchanging knowing glances. Frank showed her around the property, pointing out where he planned to add another barn, where he wanted to expand the corrals. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Hannah found herself caught up in his vision. But it was when they stood on the porch of the house looking out over the valley as the sun began to lower in the west that Frank turned to her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Hannah," he said, taking both her hands in his, "I know we have not known each other long, but I am not a man who wastes time or plays games with people's feelings. I love you. I think I have loved you since that first day when you stood there on the prairie road, dusty and exhausted but refusing to break. I want to marry you. I want to bring you here as my wife and build a life together. I want to fill that house with children and laughter and love. I know I am asking a lot, and if you need more time, I will wait as long as you need. But I had to tell you how I feel." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "You love me?" "With everything in me." "I love you too," Hannah whispered, the words spilling out of her like a dam breaking. "I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone. After everything that happened with Daniel, after feeling so alone and abandoned, I thought maybe I was not meant to have this kind of happiness. But then you appeared, and you made me believe in good men again, in good people, in the possibility of a real future." Frank pulled her into his arms, and Hannah went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady thunder of his heartbeat. "Is that a yes?" he murmured into her hair. "Yes," Hannah said, pulling back to look up at him. "Yes, I will marry you, Frank Kendrick." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Hannah had imagined her first kiss would be. It was not tentative or uncertain. It was sure and claiming and full of promise, and when they finally broke apart, Hannah felt dizzy with joy. They were married 4 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Catholic church in Pueblo. Mrs. Donovan and Alice Merriweather attended, both looking smugly satisfied, as if they had orchestrated the entire romance themselves. Bill and Tommy came down from the ranch, dressed in their Sunday best and grinning broadly. The priest pronounced them man and wife, and when Frank kissed Hannah in front of the small gathering, she felt her entire world shift and settle into place. Mrs. Donovan hosted a small wedding breakfast at the boarding house, and then Frank helped Hannah into the wagon he had brought specially for the occasion. Her few possessions were already packed and loaded, including her sewing basket and the one good dress that had belonged to her mother. As they drove away from Pueblo toward the ranch, Hannah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made her hands tremble. "You all right?" Frank asked, noticing her shaking hands. "Just a little nervous," Hannah admitted. "Everything is happening so fast." "We can go as slow as you need," Frank said gently. "I mean that, Hannah, in everything." She looked at his profile, at the strong lines of his face, and felt her nervousness ease. "I know, I trust you, Frank." The ranch looked even more beautiful in the golden autumn afternoon light. Frank carried Hannah over the threshold of the house, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. She looked around with fresh eyes, seeing it now not just as Frank's home, but as their home. The main room contained a large fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, a few comfortable armchairs. A kitchen area occupied one corner, well equipped and organized. 2 doors led off the main room, one to a bedroom, and one to a smaller room that Frank said could be used for storage or as a nursery someday. "I know it is not much yet," Frank said, watching her anxiously, "but we can add to it. Make it whatever you want it to be." "It is perfect," Hannah said, and she meant it. After months of living in a rented room, the idea of having an entire house to call her own felt like an impossible luxury. That night, as Hannah lay in Frank's arms in the big bed in the main bedroom, she felt a peace she had never known before. Frank had been as gentle and patient with her as he had promised, making her first experience of physical intimacy something beautiful rather than frightening. Now, with her head on his shoulder and his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm, she felt completely safe and cherished. "I cannot believe this is my life now," Hannah murmured. "Just a few months ago, I was standing alone on that road, certain I was going to die. Now I am here with you, and I have never been happier." "You are sure about that?" Frank asked, a smile in his voice. "No regrets?" "No regrets," Hannah confirmed. "Well, except that I wish we had met under better circumstances." "I do not know," Frank said thoughtfully. "Maybe we needed to meet exactly the way we did. You needed someone to help you, and I needed someone to help. It brought us together." "Do you think about Daniel sometimes?" Hannah asked. "About what he did?" Frank's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes. Mostly I am grateful to him in a twisted way. If he had not abandoned you, I never would have met you. But if I ever see him again, I will have some very strong words for him about how a man treats his family." "I hope I never see him again," Hannah said quietly. "That part of my life is over. This is my life now, here with you." They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, and Hannah woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee brewing. She found Frank in the kitchen, already dressed and cooking breakfast. "I thought I would let you sleep," he said, smiling when he saw her. "But I made enough for 2 if you are hungry." Hannah joined him at the table, still wearing her nightgown and wrapper, and marveled at how natural it felt to share breakfast with him in the morning light. This was her life now. This good, steady man was her husband. This house was her home. The future stretched ahead full of possibility. The autumn days passed in a blur of happiness as Hannah settled into her new life. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, rising early with Frank to make breakfast for him and the hands, spending her days cleaning and organizing the house, tending the small vegetable garden, and working on sewing projects. Frank had told her she did not need to work anymore, that he could support them both, but Hannah liked staying busy. She began taking commissions from women in the area, sewing dresses and mending clothes, building a reputation for fine work. In the evenings, after Frank finished his work for the day, they would sit together on the porch and watch the sun set behind the mountains. Frank would tell her about his day, about the cattle or the horses or whatever project he was working on. Hannah would share her own small triumphs and frustrations. They talked about their plans for the future, about adding on to the house, about buying more land, about the children they hoped to have. As winter settled over the valley, bringing snow and cold winds, Hannah and Frank grew even closer. The enforced intimacy of long winter evenings by the fire, the warmth of lying close together under heavy quilts, the quiet joy of simply being together, all deepened the bond between them. Hannah had never imagined marriage could be like this, full of laughter and tenderness and genuine partnership. One evening in late January, as they sat by the fire after supper, Frank reading a ranching journal and Hannah working on an embroidered pillowcase, Hannah realized her monthly courses were late. She had been so busy adapting to her new life that she had not noticed at first, but now she counted back the weeks and felt excitement and nervousness flutter in her stomach. "Frank," she said, setting down her sewing, "I think I might be pregnant." Frank looked up from his journal, his eyes widening. "You think? Are you sure?" "Not completely sure, but I am late, and I have been feeling different, tired and a little queasy in the mornings." She watched his face anxiously, unable to read his expression. "Are you pleased?" Frank set down the journal and crossed to her chair, kneeling beside it and taking her hands. "Pleased. Hannah, I am beyond pleased. I am overjoyed. A baby. Our baby." His face split into a huge grin. "We are going to be parents." "We are," Hannah said, laughing as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh, Frank, I am so happy. I was worried you might think it was too soon." "Too soon? We have been married 4 months. I was hoping this would happen." He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, then stood and pulled her into his arms. "We are going to need to add that nursery sooner than I thought." As winter gave way to spring, Hannah's pregnancy became undeniable. Her dresses began to strain across her middle, and she had to let out seams and eventually make new clothes to accommodate her changing shape. Frank was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about her doing too much or working too hard. Hannah found it both touching and occasionally frustrating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one day, when he insisted on carrying in firewood she had been about to fetch herself. "I know that, but I also know you will push yourself too hard if I do not make you rest," Frank countered. "Humor me, Hannah. I have never been a father before. I need to feel like I am helping." She softened at that, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes. "You are helping. You help every day just by being you. But I also need to feel useful, Frank. I cannot just sit around doing nothing for months." They compromised, with Hannah continuing to do lighter tasks while Frank and the ranch hands took over anything more strenuous. As her belly swelled with their child, Hannah felt more content than she ever had in her life. She thought sometimes of that girl standing alone on the prairie road, abandoned and terrified, and could hardly believe she had become this woman, beloved and secure, carrying her husband's child. In June, when the valley was green and lush with summer growth, Hannah went into labor. Frank rode frantically into Pueblo to fetch the midwife, then paced the main room of the house like a caged animal while Hannah labored in the bedroom. Bill had to physically restrain him from bursting in several times. "Let the women do their work," Bill said firmly. "You will only be in the way, and Hannah needs to concentrate." But what if something goes wrong? Frank asked desperately. What if she needs me? Then the midwife will call you. Until then, you wait. The labor lasted through the afternoon and into the evening, and by the time the thin wail of a baby finally sounded from the bedroom, Frank looked nearly as exhausted as Hannah felt. The midwife, a capable woman named Sarah Thompson, opened the door with a smile. You can come in now, Mr. Kendrick. You have a son. Frank nearly knocked her over in his haste to reach Hannah's side. She lay propped up in the bed, sweaty and exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. Frank sank down on the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed on the baby's red, wrinkled face. A son, he breathed. Hannah, we have a son. Would you like to hold him? Hannah asked, and carefully transferred the baby into Frank's arms. Watching her strong, capable husband cradle their tiny infant with such gentleness and wonder made fresh tears stream down Hannah's cheeks. He's perfect, Frank whispered. Absolutely perfect. What should we name him? They had discussed names, but seeing the baby now made the decision easy. Samuel, Hannah said, after your father. Samuel Frank Kendrick. Frank looked up at her, his own eyes wet. Samuel, yes, that is perfect. Little Samuel proved to be a relatively easy baby, much to Hannah's relief. He nursed well, slept in reasonable stretches, and seemed content to be passed around among the household. Frank was besotted, spending every free moment with his son, talking to him as if the baby could understand every word. Hannah would often find Frank sitting on the porch in the evening with Samuel in his arms, telling the infant all about the ranch and the cattle and the mountains. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Frank added more land, expanded the herd, built a new barn. Hannah's sewing business grew too, as word spread of her skill with difficult fabrics and intricate work. They hired a local girl, Mary, to help around the house and watch Samuel when both Hannah and Frank were busy. Life fell into a comfortable, happy rhythm. When Samuel was 2 years old, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, with more sickness and fatigue, but the reward came in the form of twin daughters. Frank nearly fainted when the midwife told him he had not one but 2 baby girls. They named them Rose and Lily, and they brought a new energy to the household with their simultaneous demands and their uncanny ability to coordinate their crying. The years passed in a blur of children growing, seasons changing, and the ranch continuing to expand and prosper. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the work of the ranch almost before he could walk properly. Rose and Lily were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. 2 years after the twins, another son arrived, whom they named James. Then another daughter, Eleanor, who had her father's amber eyes and her mother's auburn hair. Frank proved to be as devoted a father as he was a husband, patient and playful with his children while still maintaining the respect necessary for discipline. Hannah watched him teaching Samuel to ride, comforting Rose through a nightmare, braiding Lily's hair with surprising skill, and felt her love for him deepen impossibly further with each passing year. One evening in late summer, when Samuel was 12 and Eleanor still a toddler on Hannah's lap, the family gathered on the expanded porch of their now much larger house. Frank sat in a rocking chair next to Hannah, contentedly watching the older children play in the yard as the sun set in spectacular shades of gold and rose. "Do you ever think about that day?" Frank asked quietly, so the children would not hear. "The day we met?" "Of course," Hannah said. "How could I not? It was the day my real life began." "I think about it too. I think about how I almost took a different road that day. I was going to cut east toward the old Miller place, but something made me stay on the main road. If I had not, I would have missed you completely." Hannah shuddered at the thought. "I do not want to imagine that. I do not want to imagine my life without you, without all this." She gestured to the house, the land, their children. "I know I have said it before, but I need you to know how grateful I am," Frank said, reaching over to take her free hand. Not just that I found you, but that you took a chance on me. You could have said no to supper that night, or to my courtship, or to my proposal. You could have decided you wanted something different than a ranch in Colorado. But you said yes, and you made me the happiest man alive. And you gave me a home, Hannah said, squeezing his hand. A real home, with love and laughter and family. You gave me everything I ever wanted but did not dare hope for. How could I not have said yes? They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Rose and Lily chase each other around the yard while Samuel tried to teach James how to throw a rope. Eleanor babbled contentedly on Hannah's lap, playing with a ribbon from her mother's dress. "Do you ever wonder what happened to Daniel?" Frank asked. "Your stepbrother?" Hannah considered the question. She had not thought about Daniel in years, and when she did, it was without the sharp pain it once caused. Sometimes, but not often. I hope he found whatever he was looking for when he left me on that road. I hope he found some measure of peace, but mostly I just do not think about him at all. He belongs to a different life, a different Hannah who does not exist anymore. The Hannah who exists now is pretty wonderful, Frank said with a smile. She is happy, Hannah corrected, and she has you to thank for it. As darkness fell and the children were called inside for bed, Hannah stood on the porch for one last moment, Eleanor asleep in her arms, looking out over the valley that had become her home. The mountains were dark silhouettes against the star-filled sky, and a cool breeze carried the scent of grass and sage. Somewhere in the barn, a horse whinnied softly. Behind her, through the open door, she could hear Frank getting the older children ready for bed, his deep voice mixed with their laughter. This was her life now, this good, full, beautiful life. And it had all started on a dusty road in the middle of nowhere when a cowboy with kind eyes had stopped to help a desperate woman. Hannah sent up a silent prayer of thanks to whatever force had guided Frank to her that day, then turned and went inside to join her family. The years continued to unfold in their steady rhythm. Samuel grew into a young man who worked the ranch alongside his father, already showing the same steady competence and quiet strength that Frank possessed. He was 18 now, and Hannah could see glimpses of the man he would become. The twins, Rose and Lily, at 16 were beautiful young women who split their time between helping Hannah with the household and learning ranch skills from their father. Rose had inherited Frank's love of horses and could ride as well as any of the ranch hands. Lily had her mother's talent for sewing and was already taking commissions of her own. James, at 14, was the wild one, always pushing boundaries and testing limits, though his heart was good. Eleanor, now 10, was the peacemaker of the family, always smoothing over conflicts with her gentle nature. And then there was the youngest, William, born when Hannah was 41, and everyone thought their family was complete. At 6 years old, he was the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by his older siblings. The ranch had grown far beyond Frank's original dreams. They now ran over 500 head of cattle and had expanded into horse breeding as well, raising quality stock that sold throughout Colorado and beyond. The original house had been added onto twice and now sprawled comfortably across the property with enough room for everyone. Frank had also bought the neighboring property when it came up for sale, nearly doubling their land holdings. But despite all the prosperity and success, the heart of their life remained the same. Family dinners around the big table every night, evening talks on the porch, Sunday rides together through the valley, the steady rhythm of work and rest, seasons passing, children growing. Frank and Hannah's love for each other, which had begun so suddenly and unexpectedly, had only grown stronger and deeper with each passing year. One October morning, 23 years after that fateful meeting on the prairie road, Hannah woke to find Frank already dressed and sitting on the edge of the bed, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What is it?" she asked, pushing herself up on her elbows. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Frank said, reaching out to brush a strand of graying auburn hair from her face. I have just been lying here thinking about how lucky I am. 23 years married to you, Hannah, and I am still not tired of waking up next to you every morning. Hannah felt her eyes mist. Even after all these years, Frank could still make her cry with his simple declarations. Only 23 years? It feels like forever in the best possible way. I know exactly what you mean. Frank leaned down to kiss her gently. Happy anniversary, my love. Happy anniversary. Hannah pulled him back down for another kiss, deeper this time. I love you, Frank Kendrick, just as much now as I did the day you asked me to marry you. More even. More? Frank pretended to be shocked. I did not think that was possible. Well, you keep surprising me. They went downstairs together to find the older children already up and making breakfast, a tradition they had started as a surprise on their parents' anniversary years ago and had maintained ever since. The kitchen was chaos, with Rose directing operations while Lily worked on pancakes, Samuel fried bacon, and James set the table under Eleanor's supervision. William sat on the counter, supposedly helping, but mostly just getting in the way. Happy anniversary! They all chorused when Frank and Hannah appeared. You are all wonderful, Hannah said, surveying the scene with affection. But please tell me nothing is burning. Nothing is burning, Rose assured her. Well, only a little bit of the bacon, but Samuel scraped off the worst of it. Breakfast was a cheerful affair, with the family laughing and talking over each other in the way of people completely comfortable together. Afterward, Frank announced he had arranged for Bill to oversee the ranch work for the day, so the whole family could take a ride up into the foothills together. It is too beautiful a day to waste working, he said when Samuel protested that there was too much to be done. The work will still be there tomorrow. Today is for family. They saddled up horses and rode together, up into the mountains, following trails they had ridden countless times before. The aspens were at their peak, painting the hillsides in brilliant gold, and the sky was that particular shade of deep blue that only appeared in the high country. They stopped at a meadow Frank and Hannah had discovered years ago, spread out blankets, and ate the lunch the girls had packed. As the children scattered to explore, Frank pulled Hannah close to his side. This reminds me of the day I brought you to see the ranch for the first time, he said. Do you remember? Of course I remember. I thought it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. I still do. I was so nervous that day, Frank admitted. I thought if you did not like the ranch, you might not want to marry me. It seemed like they were tied together somehow in my mind. I would have married you even if you lived in a shack, Hannah said honestly. I did not fall in love with your ranch, Frank. I fell in love with you. I know that now, but at the time I was terrified of losing you. Hannah turned to look at him fully, taking in the face she knew as well as her own. Frank was 50 now, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines at the corners of his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. He was still strong and capable, still sitting his horse with the same easy grace he had when they met, but time had left its marks. She supposed she had changed too. Her auburn hair was more gray than red now, and her figure was softer after bearing 6 children. But when Frank looked at her, she still saw the same love and desire in his eyes that had been there from the beginning. You are never going to lose me, Hannah said firmly. I am yours for as long as we both live, Frank Kendrick. You are stuck with me. Best news I have heard all day, Frank said with a grin, pulling her in for a kiss that made their children groan dramatically from across the meadow. Do they have to do that? James called. We can see you, you know. Look away then, Frank called back, not releasing Hannah. It is our anniversary. We are allowed to kiss. The children's laughter echoed across the meadow, and Hannah felt her heart overflow with contentment. This moment right here was everything. The mountain air crisp and clean, her children healthy and happy, and the man she loved holding her close. What more could anyone possibly want? As evening approached and they rode back down to the ranch, Hannah found herself riding beside Samuel. Her eldest had been quieter than usual today, and she wondered what was on his mind. Something troubling you? She asked gently. Samuel was silent for a moment, then said, I have been thinking about the future, about what I want to do with my life. Hannah felt a clutch of worry. And what have you decided? I want to stay here, on the ranch, help Father run it, and eventually take it over when he is ready to slow down. Samuel looked at her anxiously. Is that all right? I know some people might think I should want to see more of the world, do something different, but this is where I belong, Mother. This land, this family, this life. It is all I have ever wanted. Relief washed through Hannah, followed by a surge of pride. Oh, Samuel, of course that is all right. Your father will be thrilled, but you should talk to him about it. Tell him what you have told me. I will, Samuel promised. I just wanted to tell you first. That night, after the children had all gone to bed, Frank and Hannah sat together on the porch in their usual spot. The air was cool with the promise of coming winter, and Frank had draped a blanket around Hannah's shoulders. Samuel spoke to me today, Frank said, about wanting to stay on the ranch, to make it his life. He told me the same thing during the ride home. What do you think? Frank asked. Are you all right with him staying here instead of going off to college or seeing more of the world? Hannah thought about it carefully before answering. I am all right with him being happy, and if staying here makes him happy, then that is what matters. We raised good children, Frank. We taught them to work hard, to be honest, to value family. But we also taught them to think for themselves and make their own choices. Samuel has made his choice, and I support it. I do too, Frank said quietly. I will admit I am glad. Selfish of me, maybe. But I always hoped at least one of our children would want to carry on what we have built here. It is not selfish. It is natural. And who knows? Maybe Rose or one of the others will stay too. Or maybe they will go off and have adventures, then come back when they are ready. Either way, they know they always have a home here. Frank pulled her closer. We did good, Hannah. With the ranch, with our children, with our life. We built something real and lasting. We did, Hannah agreed. And it all started because you were kind enough to stop and help a desperate woman on a dusty road. Best decision I ever made, Frank said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. Hannah thought about the girl she had been, abandoned and alone and terrified. She thought about how close she had come to disaster, to dying alone on that prairie road. And she thought about the miracle of Frank appearing exactly when she needed him most, offering water and help and eventually love. Life had not been perfect. There had been hard years when the cattle prices fell, when drought threatened the grazing, when illness swept through the household. There had been moments of fear and worry and grief. But through it all, they had faced everything together, and that had made all the difference. Frank? Hannah said softly. Yes, love. Thank you for everything, for saving me that day, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life. I do not think I ever properly thanked you for all of it. Frank was quiet for a moment, and when Hannah looked up at him, she saw tears glistening in his eyes. You thank me every day just by being here, just by being you. You made me complete, Hannah. Before you, I had land and cattle and a house, but I did not have a home. I did not have a real purpose beyond just surviving and accumulating more. You gave me all that. You gave me a family to work for, a reason to build something lasting. So thank you too. They held each other close as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that chance meeting. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the ranch they had built together stood solid and prosperous. Above them, the stars wheeled across the vast Colorado sky, eternal and unchanging. This was their legacy, Hannah thought. Not just the land or the cattle or even the children, though all those things mattered. Their real legacy was the love they had built together, the partnership they had forged, the proof that kindness and courage could transform lives. They had taken the worst moment of Hannah's life and turned it into the beginning of something wonderful. Years continued to pass in their gentle rhythm. Rose eventually married a rancher from the next valley over, a good man named Thomas, who reminded Hannah of Frank with his quiet steadiness. Lily chose differently, moving to Denver to open a dress shop that became quite successful, though she came home often for visits. James, after several years of restlessness, joined the army and served honorably before returning to the ranch with a deeper appreciation for home. Eleanor married the local doctor and settled in Pueblo, where she raised 4 children of her own. William, the baby, stayed on the ranch alongside Samuel, and the two brothers worked together seamlessly. Samuel married at 25, bringing a sweet young woman named Catherine to the ranch. She and Hannah became close friends, and when Samuel and Catherine's first child was born, a daughter they named Hannah after her grandmother, the circle felt complete. Frank and Hannah grew old together with the same love and partnership that had defined their marriage from the beginning. They became grandparents many times over, watching their family grow and spread while remaining rooted in the land they had built their life upon. As the years took their toll and Frank's steps grew slower, Hannah was always there at his side, just as he had been there for her through 6 pregnancies and countless small illnesses and injuries over the years. On a warm summer evening when Frank was 71 and Hannah 68, they sat together on the porch in their usual spot, holding hands and watching the sun set behind the mountains they had loved for so long. The house was full of family visiting for the 4th of July, with grandchildren running through the yard and the sound of laughter drifting from inside. "Did you ever imagine this?" Frank asked, gesturing to the scene before them. "When we first met, did you ever imagine we would have all this?" "Not even in my wildest dreams," Hannah admitted. "I was just hoping to survive, to find some way to keep going. I never imagined love or family or a home like this. You gave me everything I never dared hope for." "We gave each other everything," Frank corrected. "I was just existing before you, Hannah. You taught me how to truly live." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned gold and orange and finally purple. Hannah knew Frank's heart was growing weaker, that their time together was growing shorter. The doctor had been frank with them about his condition. But sitting here now, surrounded by the evidence of their life together, Hannah felt at peace. Whatever time they had left, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else. "I love you," Frank said softly. "From that first moment on the dusty road until now, it has always been you, Hannah. It will always be you." "I love you too," Hannah said, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for seeing me, for saving me, for loving me. Thank you for all of this." Frank raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "It was my privilege." They stayed there until full dark, holding hands and watching the stars emerge, while inside the house their family gathered, their legacy secure, their love story written in the faces of children and grandchildren, in the land they had tended together, in the life they had built from that single moment of kindness on a dusty Colorado road so many years ago. And if Hannah sometimes thought of that desperate girl standing alone on the prairie, abandoned and afraid, she felt only gratitude for every hardship that had led her to this moment, to this man, to this beautiful, abundant life. The cowboy had happened by and changed everything just as the story went. But what the story could never fully capture was the depth of that change, the way two lives had intertwined so completely that neither could imagine existence without the other. That was their truth. That was their legacy. That was their forever.